Hello guys, Gerald Duran and Scott Fairchild back to you from Cana. So, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good too. You know, a couple of days ago, we did a podcast on Lab Talks, and we talked about this entrepreneurial journey, and we talked about, you know, the stages that people go through, and we talked about the fog.
Which we both have got a lot of stories about the whole idea of fog. Oh yeah.
And so, you know, we talked about the marathon runner that knows that, you know, they're going to hit a wall, and then they know, but if you keep going, you get past that wall, and in our entrepreneurial world, we're calling it the fog, and it's part of the preparation to launch or relaunch something, and people get in that fog, and they turn around and go back. So we did a whole podcast about that.
Yep.
Today, we want to hit the spiritual side of all of this, but there was a question that came up, and it started with, why are they turning around? What's going on with the behaviors? And we talked about identity, and we talked about, we'll get into some of these things. You were whiteboarding out some of these things, and they were, and it really stimulated conversation. But something that came to me this week is, well, it depends who's in the funnel. It depends.
What do you mean?
Okay, so it depends. So I came in and I says, okay, there's kingdom entrepreneurs. Now we can define what that is.
Okay.
And then there's Christian entrepreneurs, and we can define what that is.
Yeah, because that would sound the same
Some people. To some people.
We understand that's different, but
and these are just names that we've given them. So, but
we've defined them.
we have, because really, like we can almost I could go have a meeting with somebody. You could go have a meeting with somebody, and immediately one of us, their language will give away that they're a kingdom.
Oh, for sure they will.
Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So, in your mind, what's the difference between the two? What do you see, and then I'll tell you what I see.
Okay, so I can break it down really easy, and it's the idea of influence. I mean, for me, a kingdom entrepreneur is someone that understands that they're going into an area to be an influence, and not just an influence like I hope I influence somebody, that they go in and they really understand that I'm going in there to transform an area, to bring, when I come in, I bring Jesus, I bring the kingdom with me, and I believe that when I walk into that area will be transformed by the kingdom.
Right.
As opposed to like a Christian who's like, well, yeah, I'm just a Jesus follower, and I hope I make a difference when I go in. I mean, there's a difference in the way they walk, the way they act, the way they think, and the influence that they think they're going to bring.
The way they speak, the way
Absolutely,
everything.
so much of it, everything is.
You know, this morning when we were preparing for, you know, this podcast that we're doing right now, you said, well, you know, there's a certain percentage of the world that are Christians. They're believers, okay? And so some of them are in the marketplace. Most of us are going to be in the marketplace sometime, because most of us are going to work 100,000 hours of our life in the marketplace. They may not be entrepreneurs. They could be influencers that work for somebody, and they have kind of the entrepreneurial idea. That's a real popular term that's used inside of companies that are very entrepreneur, but they're not entrepreneurs as we know it. But knowing that, one of the things that we looked at was, okay, that's right. In the whole world, in the United States, in America, there's a certain percentage of the population who are believers and that are Christians. But only 5% of them put the Bible, this book, at the center of their lives.
Correct.
Only 5%.
Right.
Only 10%, it's actually less than 10%, actually read this on a regular basis. So I think there are people out there that are entrepreneurs that happen to be Christians. There is two kinds. There's overt and covert.
You're talking about Christian
So they're Christian entrepreneurs.
Okay.
There's overt and covert.
All right.
So there's people that I know, and that you know, that are covert. Okay, what I mean by that is they would never go around and talk about their faith. Okay. Now their faith, they have a relationship with God, with Jesus Christ. They're followers of Jesus Christ. We don't know if it's good or bad. But what we do know, it's hard for it to be good if they're not in the Word every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really hard for that. So when you say only 5% make it the center of their life and only 10% read it on a regular basis, so one, we know it's just a tiny percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the people that are covert, unless you really got to know them, you probably wouldn't know that they're Christian.
So they're the people that sit in the workplace for 10 years and somebody goes, wait, you're a Christian? Oh, because they run into each other at a church or a Christian meeting, and they I never knew. It's like,
well, and it's not, they don't feel like it's politically correct to ever talk about it. I think they think that you don't bring that up. You know, I think there's and it really isn't politically correct in a lot of organizations to ever talk. I mean, there's certain things you're not supposed to talk about. Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to talk about politics. You're not supposed to talk about religion. You're not, at a lot of companies, you're not supposed to talk about anything that might offend anyone.
Right.
Which means you don't have a lot to talk about. You know, I mean, you really, I read something where today where like people were like, maybe we shouldn't get together for Thanksgiving because you're leaving your safe zone, and you're. Now this message wasn't delivered by the boomers. Let me just say that. I won't say who. Don't make me say they were millennials, Scott. I'm not going to say who they were.
No,
but
we
they
don't
did,
say that.
because we don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to offend you. But so there's these covert people. Okay, then there's a whole other group that are overt. And they are Christian, and they don't mind telling people. And they say, hey, I'm a Christian entrepreneur, I'm a faith entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a set of values, a set of Christian values that they're bringing into the marketplace. And Scott, they're all good. They have a way that they run their companies that are good, and it's based on these Christian values. Mm-hmm. Now, for a lot of them, because remember, only 10% of the whole enchilada are reading the Bible on a regular basis, and only 5% are making it the center. These people, their values may have come and probably have come from a man. Somebody that they watch.
So somebody's interpreting the scriptures for them.
And it could be totally correct.
Sure.
Not saying anything's wrong with it.
Right.
Okay. But they don't have first-hand information, and maybe it's worked in their life, so there's nothing wrong with that. I want to make sure that we don't disparage, or we're not trying to, we're not saying that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
But what I would term a kingdom entrepreneur, they're on a mission from God. They're calling.
So they're the Blues Brothers.
They're the. I was thinking that, but I thought
we're showing our age, but
I was thinking I would show restraint.
Yeah,
I would show restraint because I'm usually the one of us two that can't have restraint, and you went unfiltered.
Sorry.
So the Blues Brothers, and but no, the kingdom-driven entrepreneur is they're trying to change the size of heaven or hell. And the Great Commission is what's driving them. So that's souls, winning souls, disciples, transforming cities and nations. I mean, that's this thing that's driving them. And so for me, I'm a kingdom entrepreneur. Changing the size of heaven and hell is really important. And I've always said, for as long as you've known me, and for as long as just anybody who's ever been around me or heard my language, I've always said, in every business I've ever had, I can always articulate how this platform that the business has given me wins souls and builds disciples. Mm-hmm. Now, there's been some businesses that I have Like, let's just say for 16 years, I spent 16 years turning around companies.
Right.
Okay. So I think, in some, as a serial entrepreneur, that kind of gave me a stage, but it's really, Scott, what I did with the money. So the RPM Strategic, the turnaround company, I don't think RPM Strategic was winning souls or building discipleship. Okay. It produced money that I used and pumped into ministry. So
there's a place for that.
But souls and discipleship and kingdom assignment were always part of it. So there's this difference. So when we talk about the fog, we go, well, who's going through the fog? Is it a kingdom entrepreneur, or is it somebody who's not kingdom minded and they're an entrepreneur and they just happen to be?
Hey, let me digress for a minute.
Go ahead.
Let me just digress.
Is it something funny?
Actually, in a way, it kind of is. It's like so we're talking about people that now this guy was not an entrepreneur, but he was in the workplace, and for those people that's like the covert and overt, and so he was overt, but he was kind of obnoxiously overt. And he was talking to me one day. He said, "Yeah, the boss really got mad at me because I was just trying to evangelize everybody that was there." And he's going on, and I'm listening to him. It's like he's not getting any work done. All he's doing is evangelize. I said, and I finally stopped. I was like, they're paying you to do a job.
Do your job.
Do your job. It's like that is a form of evangelism right there. It's like by doing the right thing, because the Bible even says, do your work heartily as unto the Lord. It's like so, but he was so mad at the boss because the boss just wouldn't let him evangelize. Like, you're not paid to evangelize.
Well, here's the deal. There are some people, and probably that guy, that are overt but need to be covert.
Yeah. Well, it's
because what we would say, this is what I would say when I'm doing a turnaround, and I find a sales team that's horrible at what they do. I always tell the CEO, I say, the problem is this group of people that are on there are part of the anti-sales team. They're here to make sure nobody buys from you. In fact, I'm not even sure that they work for you. I have a feeling they work for the competitors, and it's like, the Trojan horse,
right?
And they're in it because the way they're acting, nobody will buy. And I'm pretty sure that there's a group of Christians that like think about obnoxious Christians that judge everybody, that turn everybody off,
right?
And or let's say the lazy Christian who's a lousy worker, who doesn't perform their job as though they were performing it for the Lord, which is how we're supposed to do it. And so they're late every day, or they don't, whatever. They're poor performance. But the one thing they do is they're blabbing about, and telling everybody else what they should do. That person, so I think you're right, that person needs to, we took you down a rabbit hole, but that person needs to be more covert than overt.
Right, but I think we do, there's a principle here that we have. It's like, do your work heartily as unto the Lord. It's like, you really are called to do a good job in wherever it is that you are.
Right.
And so, if you're doing that, it's like, and don't do this thing where he's like, well, I'm just being persecuted for being a Christian. It's like, no, you're not. You're persecuted because you can't do your job.
Now, this has nothing to do with our topic, but you're right.
No, and so, yeah. So anyway.
But it's really true, because it's an observation, because we've both seen it.
Right. But it does affect, as far as you're talking about, kingdom entrepreneur and really a Christian entrepreneur. It's like a kingdom entrepreneur understands that there's sometimes you always operate with wisdom. Sometimes you have to be more overt, and sometimes you have to be more overt. But your point is always about the kingdom.
When you're a kingdom entrepreneur, so let's talk about a few. Okay. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were kingdom entrepreneurs. Everybody knew them. They knew they were kingdom minded.
Right.
They didn't hide it.
Now I understand it's Old Testament. People get to say, well, that was the Old Testament.
Let's go to New Testament.
Okay.
Let's look at the disciples. Let's look at the tent maker, Paul. He was a kingdom entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Okay. Who's the granddaddy of them all in the New Testament? Jesus.
I was thinking, let me see. Gerald asked the question, the answer must be, okay, so
Jesus.
Okay, there we go.
Jesus was a kingdom-driven entrepreneur. Now, what's interesting is he wasn't like the Pharisees and the Sadducees that were going around telling everybody, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't. That's not what a kingdom entrepreneur does, because that doesn't work.
No.
That's what religion does, right? A kingdom entrepreneur has to understand results. And so you have to do things that work. Okay, so at the end of the day, if you're not changing, if you're adding to hell more than you're adding to heaven, you're something, but you're not a kingdom. Maybe you're a hell entrepreneur.
No, what do we say? We say you're led by a spirit, but it ain't a Holy
It ain't the Holy Spirit. Yeah, and so there, but in one of the things about a kingdom entrepreneur, there's a couple things: identity, mission, preparation, power and authority, execution.
Thanks for getting us back on task. I digress.
If this ends up being a 2-hour podcast, you know why.
It's my fault.
Which, if you were hanging around any of our brainstorming sessions,
it could be that.
Which, by the way, a lot of people, have you noticed that? A lot of people want to sit in. In fact, a lot of people say, can you film but I'm almost afraid to. We'd have to edit out a lot of stuff.
Not a lot, just
a little, just a few things.
Just a few things,
yeah. But I want to throw something out there really quick. There's 10% of the population are motivated by rewards.
Yeah, that was so the
90%. You're good with your math.
90% what?
Well, you figured with the 10%.
Yeah.
90.
This is amazing to me. You just
90%. Well, I didn't. This actually I got from our friend Benson, which brought this up, and he got it from someplace, and he told me, I can't remember. But 90% are motivated by pain.
That's fascinating.
So there's people. And it doesn't mean that God only works with the 10%. No, he works with the 90%. And there's a lot of changes in my life that only came through pain.
Absolutely.
I mean, in my early career, we always talked about God would, I started out in pain. And, oh, God, would you help me build this company?
Right.
And then he did, and I got the success that I wanted. And then I says, oh, God, thank you so much. By the way, get out of the driver's seat. Would you mind getting back in the trunk?
You put him in the trunk. I would at least let him sit in the back
you know
seat.
why we had to put him in the trunk?
Never mind. I don't want to.
Because we're doing a lot of sin. And that's really, Scott. In my early years, that's what it was. As a 20-year-old, that's an entrepreneur and making money, and just green and young and dumb and every. Spiritually, business, in every possible way. That's what you do.
Yep.
So what would happen was God would allow pain in my life, discomfort, and when you're uncomfortable, who are you looking for?
Oh, I'm looking for the comforter.
You're looking for the comforter.
Yeah.
And so that's why, just in life, I think, all the ups and downs, Benson would say it's all the odds and evens of the day. It's the season. There's all these different seasons. Notice that it's not harvest in most places. Now, if you're in greenhouse conditions, that's a subject for another day, you will have harvest all the time. And when you're in kingdom mode, you can have harvest all the time.
Well, there's a scripture that goes with that the harvester actually is going to overtake the one that's doing the preparation. That's how fast God can move.
And in any times of our life when your focus is, whether it's with a business or a church, which is a business, it's not work great.
That's right.
And so it has some of these same rules. We see that in place. Let's go to identity really quick. Tell me the identity, what you think of, what's at the top of your head with the identity of a kingdom entrepreneur? So you talked about, did you use the word ambassador? Is that what, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the identity, if you're an ambassador from America, get sent to another country, what's your identity?
I represent the President of the United States, and I speak as if I was the President of the United States. So for an ambassador, for an ambassador, when they walk into a place, it's like I speak as if I am his voice, the voice of Christ himself. It's like that's really, and Jesus even said that. It's like, you're going to go in my name. And when he says go in my name, it's not just go and just put the label on. It's like when you say in the scriptures where it says go in my name, it means you are me when you go into areas.
Well, that's totally different than if I'm an American tourist.
Right.
So if we're going, let's say we're going to the Middle East, and I'm the American ambassador. I have a power and authority. I represent the president of the United. I represent our country. I'm living to the standards of the country that sent me. Okay. So if I want steak tonight, I can have steak. It doesn't matter what's going on. If I'm the ambassador to Haiti, I don't live to the standards of Haiti. I live to the standards of the United States. However, if I'm a tourist and I go into there, I can't command that whole nation to accommodate me. They're not going to. In fact, I don't think they're going to listen. It's really the difference between a player and a spectator, isn't it?
So let's liken this. So you're talking about the difference really between a kingdom entrepreneur and a Christian entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same type of thing.
Same thing.
A kingdom entrepreneur comes in and understands that they really are. I'm an ambassador. I walk in with the power and authority of Christ himself. So then you're talking about identity. It's like that, and that's a process. It's not like Sunday I woke up today and go.
No, it's a process.
And some days I feel more like that than other days. So,
right.
But my goal is to become more and more like Christ, so that I understand that really I represent him. I am an ambassador wherever I go. And I walk with all the authority and the power of Christ himself, because of Christ in me, not because of anything that who I am.
You know, Benson told me a funny story that I was surprised that he told this to me, but he said, he says, when I first moved to the United States and I lived in New York, he says, this is before I was married. He met a gal. He said she was, I think he said she was beautiful, but if his wife is watching, maybe he didn't mention that.
Okay, all right.
And so she came onto him. So they spent some time together, and she came onto him. And she wanted to go to, a room or something. And he said, absolutely not. A king doesn't go sleep with, and I forgot what he told me.
Oh, that's
but
so
he
good.
came here to the United States as a king. And he says a king has king behavior. And I cracked up when he told me this. It was funnier coming from Benson with his Cameroon accent and all that. But this is an identity. He came here on a mission to do something. So your identity is you're representing the kingdom that sent you. Okay? And what's your mission?
My mission is the king's mission.
Whatever the king's message.
Which is go and make disciples of nations. And so that's what I seek to do.
So that is what's really driving you. Preparation. Now it's interesting because you don't go into the battlefield to prepare. You prepare before the battlefield. So one of the things that we were talking about, if we were drawing an analogy in the military, we would say there's the regular enlisted, nothing wrong with them.
Right.
And then there's the special forces.
Right.
The special forces, and I think everybody wants to be special forces. I mean, it's very
everybody would want, or
like
most
we watch movies. Who doesn't? If don't you want to be Delta Team or whatever?
Right.
You want to go in there, and it's a small, and they have an identity. There was a price and a cost, and there were some fogs that they went through. Because I don't remember the number, but we were talking about it's a lot of people that go apply, and very few that make it. And I think it's really the same thing to be kingdom-minded. The price tag, the cost of that is totally different, and the training for that is totally different. Because for years, I told you this, for years I was an entrepreneur who was a Christian, and maybe I wasn't kingdom minded, but I didn't, I was telling Benson this, I had a lot of sin in my life that, it didn't seem to affect my results, my financial results, right? And so, to be a successful business terms, on the world's terms, you don't need God. There's plenty of people that aren't Christians, don't believe in God, that are super successful,
right,
on world terms. Okay, but the minute you get in special forces, the minute you want to go into kingdom entrepreneur, all of a sudden Ephesians 6 comes into play, because the enemy is going to try to take you out.
Right.
I've heard this over and over from, and we know this because we're both in our 50s.
Right.
I know it's surprising. Yeah. I know we don't look it, but the gray says we've gone through some stuff.
Exactly.
You have stories, I have stories.
Yeah.
The price that we pay, because the thing is that the work that we're doing, its focus, the mission that we're on, is to change the size of heaven and hell. And we've both been focused on that well before we came together, and then sure. Together now, right. Changing. That's the results that we're looking at. So the preparation is totally different. And so preparation, if you're a kingdom entrepreneur, it's a lifestyle. It's like, to be a regular entrepreneur, you have to be a continuous learner. But in kingdom, every problem is a spiritual problem. Because you're going to the Holy Spirit for the answer for everything.
So then that ties into the idea of identity. It's like, but if your identity, the more we understand our identity in Christ, and our identity really as His ambassador, you see the world differently, and even you see the problems differently, and you even see the fog differently. But to get through the fog, you got to understand. You got to get that foundation of what your identity is and who your identity is, and where you want to go.
Here's what I love about being a kingdom entrepreneur versus a regular entrepreneur. A kingdom entrepreneur, all you have to know is your calling. Okay, most of us are going to be 100,000 hours in the marketplace. You could be a kingdom entrepreneur or a kingdom influencer. So an influencer might be somebody who's entrepreneurial. They're working for somebody. They're signing the backs of checks, but not the fronts of checks. So that's fine. That's fine too. But when you are, when you're a kingdom entrepreneur, you could be a nobody and still be eligible. I love that.
Yeah.
But do you know, Scott, to be a regular entrepreneur, you have to have some resources. You have to have some. One of the things I love about God's systems, He looks for the foolish things of the world to confound the wise.
I said something to the church a while back, and I keep reminding people of this. Like, God only uses flawed people. He only uses flawed people. So anybody that points fingers at you and say, "Well, you'll never amount to anything," it's like, you know what? I think I qualify.
And He likes the super flawed. He does the super flawed.
Okay.
People because think about it. Out of all the people, think about the disciples. Okay, so they got a bad one, right? Who was the bad one? Judas, right? Not a good one.
Right.
So you can imagine all the committee meetings after. Oh, we got to do something. We've got to vet. Scott, we got to vet. We can't just
they did. They in Acts chapter 1 they vetted and
they got Matthias.
They got two guys. They narrowed it down to two guys, and then they narrowed it down to one guy, and nobody ever hears from him again. Now that doesn't mean that he wasn't successful and he didn't do well and whatever. But it's interesting that we never hear about this guy again.
Who did God chooses Saul. To pen most of the New Testament, Saul becomes Paul. Nobody in their right mind, none of that new Christian, the New Testament, nobody was going to go, nobody would say, you know what, that Saul guy, that's who we want.